I'm Kevin Davis. This is, the Catholic Family Podcast, as well as several other channels. If you're watching on any of the channels, Twitter, Rumble, etc., we're glad to have you guys here. I got a fantastic panel today to talk about the newly elected Cardinal Prevost, now known as Leo the 14th, which I have a hard time saying. So I might call him Prevost from now on because that's one of those special names that it's like I don't know if I can stomach calling him that. So Francis was an easier one because like there wasn't a Francis before, even though he takes the name of a great saint. So I could kind of stomach that, but the Leo the 14th, I don't know. So I think I'm going to call him Prevost. Sorry if that offends some people, but that's probably how I'm going to use it. I don't know the rest of the panel; they may say it differently, but I'm going to say Prevost from now on. We're joined by for the first time by Stephen Cox. He's a journalist with LifeSite News. Stephen, it's really great to have you here. Mario Derksen of Novus Ordo Watch and Louie Verrecchio of akacatholic.com. Really three of the best to do it. I mean, three of the best guys, especially on Twitter. I really, the last week I've been watching them almost consistently. The one other that we really wish was here is SD Wright of WM Review. He really even called this. He predicted that it was going to be Prevost. So major props to him. We wish he could be here. Unfortunately, he has other duties and cannot join us. I hope to join him on another podcast here in the coming days to get his opinion as well. And we might be joined by Father Carlos Cepeda as well here in the coming minutes, but priests, they have other duties that take their attention. But Stephen, I think we would love to start with you. If you could just give us a basic overview. Who is this cardinal that most people I'd certainly never heard of him before. I mean, you guys are a little more plugged in. Maybe you have, but maybe if you could give us just a basic summary of who he is.
Yeah, so he's 69. He's, I think we could just generally call a conciliar company man. He's an old school sort of Chicago liberal, where I spent several years living about 14 years ago. He was born there in Chicago in 1955. He entered the Augustinian order in 1977. Novus Ordo ordained everything in 1982, joined the Peruvian missions and became sort of several decades in the missions down there in Latin America. It wasn't until sort of Francis elevated him in the mid-2010s, of course, this was 2014, when he elevated him to apostolic minister of a Peruvian diocese down there. He also worked as a rector and sort of gained popularity that way with the people, did a lot of corporal social justice sorts of things like that with the Third World. And in 2015, that's when Francis appointed him as a Novus Ordo bishop down there. But his fame sort of grew from there. And in 2020, Bergoglio appointed him to the dicastery of the bishops. That's a very powerful organization in the Vatican. And he's been there for the past 5 years. He's been there serving along with Supich, who's also from Chicago. And we all know Supich's track record at various appointments with different bishops and clergy of the Novus Ordo. And of course, his own relationship with Cardinal McCarrick, now deceased former Cardinal McCarrick. And so this Prevost, he was the head of the dicastery since January. He was named in January of 2023, took over about, I think, the middle of the year. And infamously around that time is when an apostolic visit happened to Bishop Strickland down in Texas. And so it seems to be one of the very first situations he was involved in. It's not necessarily widely known if he himself had a great deal of involvement in that. I think that happened later in the year 2023. But since then, Bishop Strickland just told yesterday, Glenn Beck actually, that he is concerned because of the various appointments that Prevost did elevate while he was in charge of this dicastery. And I think one of them, obviously, is the appointment of McElroy to the See of Washington, D.C. And of course, McElroy has all sorts of ties to McCarrick as well. So it seems that he has had a hand in very much how the church is operating as a functionary of the Bergoglio regime. Again, conciliar company man, I think is a great way to put him. He's much more amiable, I think you could say, than Bergoglio ever was. He seems to put a sort of smile on the face of the revolution. But that's sort of who he is, where he's at, and kind of how he came to power. From my understanding, he also has the backing of Parolin. And we can talk about that later, but I wouldn't be surprised to see if Parolin hangs around as Secretary of State.
Interesting. Yeah, it's fascinating that as an American coming in, it's going to be really interesting. And I really appreciate it that we are not going to have any issues with false translations, right? I think we're going to have plenty of Mario's going to have a feel. Mario doesn't have to use Google Translate anymore. Mario's just going to boom, we can go right into the nonsense that we know is going to come. By the way, everyone watching, please like this channel right now. That really helps other people see it. So please hit that like button. It's really easy. You just got to go click, and then the other people are going to view it. Share it if you can. Share it right now when we're getting started. There's going to be really good information. You have some of the really top experts in this field talking about this topic today. So please share it so that others can watch it as we stay here live. Please keep it orderly in the comment section, guys, too. I know it's hard sometimes, but let's be mildly charitable at least. So Mario, maybe I'll go with you next. Do you have any comments on the person, because it's kind of who he is in general? I don't know if you've heard his name before the last week or so.
Yeah, in fact, so I don't know a whole lot about him just yet, but his name had been showing up a lot in recent months and last 2 years or so, because I read the bulletin that the Vatican press office puts out every day, and every day they list the audiences, right, that Francis in those days would have. And very often, I want to say maybe 3 or 4 times a week, the first name on that audience was Robert Francis Prevost. And that's because he was the head of the dicastery for bishops. So it would make sense that he would go and have an audience with Francis a lot, because they're constantly discussing candidates to be made Novus Ordo bishops. And so to me, that made sense, right? If they're going through candidates, if they need Bergoglio to sign off on new appointments, they would have a lot of meetings. So I was quite familiar with the name, though not really with the person.
Interesting. Louie, had you heard of him before, or is it, again, kind of like for me, just out of the dark?
Really just heard of him mostly in the pre-conclave suppositions about who the players were and who had a chance to be elected. So he wasn't totally unfamiliar. And of course, I knew that he headed up the dicastery for bishops, which, again, as Stephen said, and Mario alludes, very important role in the Vatican. If I could just take a step back, I don't know if other sedevacantist types or people like us who recognize this thing in Rome, the conciliar church, as being a counterfeit. So we're a little bit jaded, right? But watching this unfold, the smoke coming out of the chimney, the crowd going wild, and then ultimately, the curtain parts and it's go time. And you look at the people in the crowd, and for me, that was kind of an emotional thing to look at. It's a demonstration of how hungry the world is for the mystical body of Christ. They're hungry for Christ. And many of them think they found that mystical body mistakenly. They've been deceived. But it was really something to see, in my view, the crowd's reaction. And you could see there was one shot in particular of a young girl, maybe 15, 16 years old, too young to have an agenda, crying her eyes out at the moment, because it was, so historical and momentous, and the successor of Peter's coming, and, all of the things that we know aside, I was touched by that. One of the things that was mentioned here, though, his role as head of the dicastery for bishops, that is so telling. Before I get to that, well, Stephen, you gave a great biography, like a real good snapshot of what would be considered maybe a conventional biography of the guy for the most part. If you're looking to find out some real insights into where he stands on some of the hot button issues in the church today, like the traditional Latin Mass, the blessing of gay couples, Amoris Laetitia, the biggest elephant in the room that there is. After doing quite a bit of research on this guy, I could find next to nothing that you could point to and say, well, in 2018, he said this. He gave a sermon in which he stood, in defense of Amoris Laetitia, for example. Those things aren't out there. And I'm in the midst of working on a post for the blog that I'm going to title International Man of Mystery, because that's who he is in a sense to me. Not that we don't know where he stands. His silence alone on those major issues tells us a great deal. But my thoughts about where he's coming from as the head of this dicastery for bishops, his appointment of McElroy is huge. I mean, that is a major tell. It was earlier in 2024 that Bergoglio first started to fall ill and had to alter his schedule, and he can barely move. In February of 24, he's being evaluated at the hospital because they said he had a flu. I don't know that we can take that at face value. The guy had some serious lung issues, obviously, that ended up leading to his death. the point that I'm making is, to the extent that a Roman pontiff might lean on the judgment of the head of the Congregation for Bishops, as it was, double it in this case, because Bergoglio, running out of gas, there's no question that he was relying extremely heavily on Prevost to help him make decisions. And what did he land on? McElroy, the guy who really is the poster boy for Episcopal gay support in the United States of America. And his pedigree. Look at Washington, D.C. McCarrick, Wuerl, Gregory, now McElroy. It's like that's become the epicenter of gay Catholicism in the United States. And obviously Prevost is totally on board with that, wants to keep that tradition going. So those are my quick thoughts right off the bat.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And Stephen, I'll ask you, I mean, I was pretty surprised that it was an American bishop. Was that something, or cardinal, I should say, is that something that surprised you? Was it something that you were, again, like I said, SD Wright was right on it. He predicted this, but what, that's surprising, right? Because I always thought that Francis had this kind of a real grudge against the American cardinals and really the American church. So I did not see this coming. Did you kind of expect it, or?
Well, a couple of things there. To Louie's point, one way we actually can kind of know what this man thinks is he's been pretty active on Twitter the last couple of years, and he has been putting out a lot of pro-social justice, anti-Trump, pro-immigration comments and tweets. And he's been retweeting, unfortunately, during the George Floyd riots, he said, "Let us stand against racism with our brothers and sisters." And he has all awful takes linking to America Magazine, National Catholic Reporter. So, yeah, there are some things we can pick up on him, I think, and from his own background. Again, I went to school at Loyola University of Chicago for grad school, and many of my professors went to the same school that Prevost did. That's the Chicago Theological Union. And it's basically where all the leftists in Chicago go for their education, for the post-secondary education. And just earlier today, I saw, and I believe Mario and Louie, I think he saw this too, a former classmate of his at CTU in Chicago, a former nun, this poor woman, she abandoned her vocation, said that back in the day, Prevost expressed support for her desire. I think it was to become a priest. And, so if that story is true, and if these other tea leaves that we can read from his tweets suggest anything, it's that he is a man of the left. And but to your point, Kevin, was I surprised? I mean, I don't think anybody would have suggested for sure this is the guy who's going to be chosen. I think the odds-on favorite, at least if you wanted to make some money, it was Parolin and Tagle, who I don't think ever had a chance. Pizzaballa seemed to be someone who had some intrigue there. So, this guy was really on not too many people's radar. I know Steve Bannon mentioned him in a podcast, worrying because saying he was a sort of a dark horse figure. And, if some other reports are true. In fact, if you go to Edward Penton, he's National Catholic Reporter's Register, Vatican reporter. He put on his Substack a article from the Spanish language Info Vaticana, and it was from a journalist who had an interaction with Austin Ivory, that's Francis's biographer, and then James Martin, just a couple days ago, I think. And it was about a run-in they had, I think it was in Rome. And Ivory confronted this reporter and said, why are you going after Cardinal Prevost? And this reporter said, I'm not going after him. I'm exposing the cover-up, a culture of a cover-up in the Vatican. And what he was doing, it turns out, because there are allegations against Prevost covering up situations in not just when he was in charge of the Augustinians in Chicago, but also when he was in the, I think when he was also in charge of Peru, there's allegations that he didn't take allegations enough seriously. And so this reporter for Info Vaticana said that interaction made it clear to him that Prevost was actually the liberal, the James Martin, the Lavender Mafia's choice, seemingly for quite a long time. And so, I think if looking back, hindsight's always 20/20. We can kind of connect the dots. If you don't want Parolin and his baggage with China, which seemed to be a big concern for a lot of people, and rightfully so, and if you want to sort of defang or at least try to neutralize the effect of Trump who, for all good and ill, he is a force against globalism, against social justice, and in many ways. If you want to sort of counter that, well, you go with a friendly face from America who is the Francis 2.0, and quite younger. And so I think that's sort of like my overall reaction is, I don't think at all this guy was on my radar, but it sort of makes sense now that they've gone with him. And the larger agenda, I think that's going to be rolled out these next several years.
Interesting. Before I get a response from Mario and Louie, I'm going to bring in Father Carlos Zepeda. Father Zepeda, thank you for joining. And what kind of makes our screen a little funky, but we like having you here, Father. Father, you did a video last night on the Catholic Wire. Anyone who's watching, go check out Father's awesome channel, Catholic Wire. Father, Stephen just mentioned a bit about the issues with the covering up sexual allegations. That's kind of, at least the video, part of the video I watched from you was about that. And do you have any comments on that, first of all, about this new Prevost and his issues there?
He was very much under the radar, I think, for a lot of people. For me, this is interesting because I had an interview with a lady who was she was the wife of the ambassador of Honduras in the Vatican, Marta Alegría, and she wrote a book called Sacred Betrayals. Pretty good book, actually. It's very interesting. And so she was involved with. She had problems with Cardinal Maradiaga, who was a friend of Francis. And it's a very similar case. Maradiaga is this guy. He's very charismatic, supposedly very popular. And there is all these allegations that happen under his care, where on the one side they have a speech of being very tough, against abuse. And on the other hand, they let these things go by. And no one would know, except the people that are being the victims of that. Because if you're familiar with this, the left is very popular, very strong in Latin America. And so they are in cahoots with the media as well. In Mexico, there is no conservative media. There is no conservative media. Everything is working hand in hand with the government. So no one would know. There's only the internet media that pops it up. So when I saw that he had been in Peru and I read this story, I thought it was really interesting. It's a very similar case to Maradiaga. So he has the case of, I'll be brief, he has the case of 3 ladies that were abused in his diocese, Chiclayo, I believe it is. And when you look at the process, to be honest, I try to be skeptical. When I look at the process, I thought to myself, maybe you could say he was trying to do his job, because it seems like, at first he created this organism to listen to people victim of abuse. And he listened to them. He told them to go to the law. But once you look, read between the lines, you see that that's not the case. The one thing that caught me, and I think this is the main factor. So he doesn't start the investigation. Then comes his successor. He goes to Rome when he was the head of the dicastery for the bishops. And then his successor starts apparently the investigation. Nothing happens again. The thing that is really a factor where you can see the corruption is a canon lawyer offers to help these ladies, and pro bono, I think it was. He just said, "I'll help you out." He started trying to do the process. He started trying to do the investigation, and as soon as he pushed a little bit too hard, they canceled him. They tell him, "Okay, you're not allowed to be a canon lawyer anymore in this diocese. You're no longer incardinated in the diocese where he was," and he receives an invitation to abandon the priesthood, to basically to abandon the clerical state before he gets sued on the legal, by the state. So that there shows you that there was a lot of corruption in that, and that they wanted to keep it quiet. And I believe, at this I'm not sure, maybe some of you know, but I believe that there was actually recently they received a payout. The victims received a large payout. So that he has that case in Peru. And just to finish the answer, he also had a couple cases here in America when he was working in the Augustinian order.
And Mario, maybe I'll ask you this. First of all, Mario, nice. It's a really nice coffee cup you have there. You got to turn it the other way so everyone can see the Catholic Family Podcast. There it is. There it is. There it is. If anyone wants a mug, let me know. We're about to start actually selling them. So you can see it. It's beautiful, beautiful little mug there.
Yep.
And trust me, we're not making money off of them. We just want people to have the merch. And again, everyone like, share, subscribe, all of that stuff. Please do it now so that more people can watch the show. Yeah, Mario, I mean, I guess continue on from Father. And do you think this is going to be an issue? I'm kind of surprised they elected someone who has this type of issue, because I think it's kind of a hot button topic. I mean, are you surprised by that?
Well, I haven't really done any research on it, but I did see that there is a dispute about whether or not he failed in his duty, or however he responded or didn't respond to these to abuse allegations. So I can't really say anything about it until I've looked at all the facts, or until we know what the facts are. But I guess we'll find out before long. But I don't know what it would mean if he's got that hanging over him. I mean, Bergoglio had all kinds of scandals associated either with him or with the people that he chose, and somehow he was like Teflon. It just nothing stuck. Well, I guess it's because the liberal press, the secular press, they were all fans of Francis, so they didn't really hold him to account, right? But no, I don't know. I don't know where that's going to go. But then we also want to remember that that's not really, even if he did act in a way that was criminally negligible or just downright wrong, immoral, and in terms of like maybe covering up sexual abuse or whatever, that's not what would prevent him from being Pope. Right. That has nothing to do with it. That might make him a bad man, but it doesn't make him ineligible for the papacy. And so you can have a bad Pope, but you can't have a Pope who doesn't profess Catholicism.
And maybe Louie, I think you're a good one to talk about that. We've talked about that in previous shows, but I mean, kind of that topic in general. So I saw someone on X today said, we're in a Bergoglian church now. Now it's a Bergoglian church. And I'm sure you would agree with me. No, Bergoglio was a son of Vatican II, and it seems so is now Prevost. So it really goes back to that. Maybe you have a few comments on that before we continue with Prevost, because I think it's really important, again, to always mention this didn't start with Bergoglio, guys.
No question about it. I mean, yeah, it's not a Bergoglian church. It's a conciliar church, no doubt about it. Everything that Bergoglio did, some of the most outrageous things that he did, if you connect the dots, they go all the way back to the council. He didn't have an original bone in his body, I like to say. He wasn't making things up as he went along. He was simply implementing the council with more integrity and with more energy than the men that came before him. Can we expect this from this Leo the 14th person? I would say we probably can. To go back, though, to the sexual abuse thing, Mario's point's well taken. That doesn't disqualify him from being the Roman pontiff. It's going to be whether he actually professes the Catholic faith or not. If he's not a Catholic, obviously he cannot be the Pope. But where this sexual abuse thing may come into play, and to your point, Stephen, no question, he's coming from the left. There's no doubt about that. And we know that if for no other reason than he was silent on things like Amoris Laetitia, which was just loaded with blasphemy and heresy. If you can't speak out about that as a shepherd of a diocese, and he was at that time and continued until 23, then obviously, something's wrong there. If you can't speak out against fiducia supplicans and the blessing of homosexual couples, clearly you're not on board with the Catholic faith. But where the sexual abuse thing come back to be a factor in this, has a truly dirty background in that regard. This can be a tool for blackmail. Not that he's not inclined to implement a leftist agenda anyway, but he's open to blackmail to be able to maybe push his hand to do more, faster, get on board with the globalist agenda more outwardly than he would otherwise, because there's this information that they're not going to want to get out. Just a thought.
Interesting. So, Stephen, as someone who covers this as a journalist, is that something that, are you kind of gearing up for 20 more years of the same thing? Are you kind of thinking, is it going to be more, is it going to be more mild, or are you going to, you're just buckling down like, hey, yep, we're going to be covering the same topics, same issues that we've been covering for the last 13 plus. I mean, really, we, of course, again, we're saying it goes back to Vatican II. Hopefully Louie comes back, but Where do you think is going to happen? What's the near or even the far future, do you think, with how this is going to wind up? Obviously, it's just a guess, but what would your
Yeah, I mean, my position is this is Francis 2.0. I mean, these sort of semi-trads and others who are on Twitter right now saying, oh, he wore the red vestments on the loggia, saying he spoke some Latin. I mean, this is it's really kind of sad to see, and it's really missing the situation. And I compared it to on Twitter today. I said, look, after World War II, what happened in Europe? The Soviet Union built an Iron Curtain, right? And then they set up these puppet states to serve the communist regime. Although they had different leaders, Ceausescu and others in different countries, they all adhered to the system. And the Vatican II Church has done the same thing. They, with these various successors, so-called, they have different personalities, right? Different flavors, if you will. But they all subscribe to the same errors. And that's the problem here, is that everyone who is trying to hold out hope or who wants to see some silver lining here is forgetting that we are in a revolutionary moment. We are living revolutionary multiple centuries or decades, right? This is an occupied power, occupying power that's sitting in on these seats. And so, if we take actually just what Prevost's own words were on the Loggia, he said, I want a synodal church. That's a direct quote. We need to be a, quote, synodal church. And James Martin, this infamous Jesuit, who in his own video today on Twitter said, hey guys, it's me, Jim Martin. So he doesn't refer to himself as a priest. He calls himself Jim Martin. So I'm going to call him Jim Martin too. He praised Prevost for being an honest and humble man at the synod last year. They were seated at the same table, and there's a bunch of lay people in between them. Actually, I guess they're all lay people, right? We look at what has been happening in the Vatican for the last 12 years. We look at what Prevost has been involved with, what he's been saying already, and the fact that he's leaving in all of the curial officials. Now, I don't expect anyone to kick everybody out overnight. I guess maybe if we had a true pope, we would. But that does speak volumes, I think, to what we can expect to see. And I think if he's out here saying we need a synodal church, and he's speaking about Francis glowingly in his opening remarks, there's a clear indication as to, yes, to answer your question, Kevin, we may be in for a very long haul of the same exact stuff, and that the revolution continues on. And I think we cannot lose our heads, or at least those who are in the media should not be getting too excited over this little thing or that little thing, because they don't indicate really anything other than you're trying to give really false hope. I think we will know when this revolution is coming to an end, and when there's actually really good steps that is happening. What we've seen so far, and what I expect, 99% full confidence for the next multiple years, is that we will not get any sort of meaningful reversal, save some sort of St. Paul moment, which I think might be the only way out of this mess, is for one of these guys in white to convert to tradition on the spot. And so there's a lot more questions to be had about that and to be discussed about. But I think at the moment, myself, it seems to me that this will be Francis 2.0, and there's no reason to change my attitude about how I approach it until there's any significant real changes that give evidence to that.
Yeah,
no,
I totally agree. I would say that.
Comment on that, Mario. Maybe if you want to comment, I'll bring Father. And it looks like we've frozen a little bit. I hope people can still hear us. I am broadcasting. To comment on from Stephen there.
I mean, of course, it's very early, but I would say my initial impression from what I've seen and read is that it's going to be more of the same, but it's going to be packaged a lot more nicely. Okay, a lot more in a way that is going to be more palatable for a lot of people. So it's going to essentially be a Bergoglian theology with better diction, more incense, so to speak, right? More beautiful vestments, and probably, if you look at Prevost, the way his mannerisms and everything, the way he carries himself, that's as far as the externals go, definitely a great step up from Bergoglio, who was walking around, with thumbs up and all that stuff. And so I think you're going to see more a portrayal of dignity and so on, and it's going to impress a lot of people. It's going to sway a lot of people, and that's a problem, because it means if it's the same theology as Bergoglio is going to make it all the more dangerous. So in a way, the last 12 years were a great grace from Almighty God to show everybody, look at this. If you can't figure it out now, well, when will you? And so in a way, it's a little bit like 2005 all over again, I think, where you had Benedict XVI. And remember, the very Christopher Ferrara of the Remnant, who had weeks earlier denounced Joseph Ratzinger as an ecclesial termite that makes, how did he put it? I think he said he tears down the church while making busy with the appearance of building up. And he called him, he mockingly referred to him as our only friend in the Vatican. And weeks later, he had, when he was there in St. Peter's Square, he had tears in his eyes for joy, because he thought, oh my goodness, is this now the great restoration of tradition? And and of course, that was his narrative, the narrative he ran with for the next 7 years, or however many years it was, and wouldn't be bothered by the facts. But heresy in Latin is still heresy. The Novus Ordo in Latin with incense facing the tabernacle is still the Novus Ordo. So you have to, I understand, when you see these pictures, when you see these images, right, and it's got the beautiful vestments like yesterday, the Mosetta, and you've got the crowds and everybody's cheering. It's so momentous that you can easily be swayed just emotionally to say, oh my God, look, now it's all going to be wonderful. But reason has to prevail. This is another Vatican II, man. You can't even blame him. What else would he be? That's his religion, right? How can you expect to have a Catholic all of a sudden out of that College of Cardinals? So of course he's a Vatican II. Of course he's not going to. He might do something like he might ease the restrictions against the traditional Mass. He may be a conciliatory guy, but he's not going to rescind fiducia supplicans. He's not going to come out against anything that Francis in his official acts that pertain to doctrine and are a matter of truth rather than a matter of discipline. He's not going to touch any of that. In terms of discipline, he might ease certain restrictions. He might, do some tinkering there. But as far as doctrine goes, he's going to fully embrace the Bergoglian magisterium. And what else? What else could he do? I mean, what would he do if he thinks Francis was a true pope and that this is the Catholic magisterium? How's he going to go against that in any meaningful way?
It's a good question. I mean, Father,
without calling into question everything that he's done.
Absolutely. Father, as a traditional Catholic priest, I mean, is it something? Are you gearing up for more of the same, or are you going to kind of have to take a different approach? I mean, it's slightly different and say, hey, it's not as obvious as it was before. I mean, how do you feel about that?
It's a good question. So the first thing I would say, just we need red buttons where we can just push a button to approve the other people's comments. I think that would be really great.
Everyone give us the likes if you like comments.
You get
give us a like on the channel.
Or something coming up.
I like that idea, Father.
But that was actually it's a very good point. And I think that's something we need to insist is as long as they don't have the faith, that's the problem, that they don't have the faith. And so not only, the other bad things that they do are kind of a moot point, but also, unless you want to understand them, but also no good deed that they do should be a matter of attention to us, whether if they're wearing, big chasubles or not. And I think that's super important because all these deception that people fall into, when the Eid came out, the priests have this secret chat meeting. Let's call it the conciliabulus. And one of the comments I made was that I said, I prefer a dumb enemy that is very bad at speaking than someone that is very smart, cunning, and charismatic. And so actually, as Mario said, I'm gearing up for a more difficult time because before, people were coming to our churches. People were coming to our churches with Francis. They see it. It's very clear. It's repugnant. That's the difference. It's repugnant. And this is poison, with a little spoonful of honey. And so, no, a lot of people are going to fall. I think For me, the part that is very interesting, and I don't want to get into this discussion necessarily because it's easy to fall into a mistake. How does this play into the whole scheme of things, the globalist agenda and the plan of the devil, which eventually leads us to the Antichrist at some point? But how does that play in that? And without making any predictions or anything like that, but I believe that at some point, what does the devil want to do? At some point, what he will do is create a one world order and a world war church where even traditional Latin Mass goers will be welcome. You'll have your incense, you'll have everything that you want, but there will be even just one point of the faith that he denies, or several. And the way it looks like right now is like the devil is going to prepare this to be, you have to accept the LGBT, you have to accept immorality, basically. And immorality that looks good, though, immorality that, it's charitable to accept everyone else. I think that's where things are going. And also, you will not accept the Catholic Church. There's no such thing as an absolute truth, an absolute faith that is, given by God. It's all relative. I think that's where this is going. And the most dangerous thing that can happen, and probably this will happen, is that they actually offer a place for the traditional Latin Mass goers to go where no one's going to touch you, but you compromise. You have to compromise and say that we are also okay. And that would be enough for you to really lose your faith and lose your soul.
So pretty much everyone here is going to have to work overtime to continue to provide the truth. And then anyone watching, again, please make sure, if you don't already, go and subscribe to all the channels: LifeSite News, NovusOrdoWatch.org, and aka at Catholic.com, thecatholicwire.com. This is where you're going to find a lot of truth in these times that are going to be very, more and more confusing, unfortunately. We don't have to talk about this right now. Steve and we don't get you a comment here in a second, but I want to keep this in our minds because I've seen a couple comments about this. So we'll come back to this later. Remind me, because this is interesting. They're talking about how this new Pope wants to unite the East and the West with the Orthodox. So we don't have to comment on that now, but just an interesting tidbit that I've seen a couple of comments from the folks watching. But Stephen, I think you had a comment on what something Father was saying.
Well, just a last comment. I do need to go, and it's been a privilege being on with all you today and discussing this momentous time here, I think. And with where things are going, I do suspect we will have a bit of a loosening on certain things. To be elected, you need 2/3 support, and I'm guessing that the so-called conservatives made some sort of arrangement where they had some concessions come from him. So I do suspect we will see something along those lines, as Father's getting to, about the appearance of less hostility. And to that point, what's going to be happening, I think, fairly soon, is the issue of SSPX future bishops, right? And will they make a sort of arrangement with this Leo the 14th? I suspect they will. They are sort of painted into a corner here. In years past, they would always say, no deal. This conciliar zoo wants to put tradition in a cage at the zoo. At least that's what Bishop Fillet once said about 20 years ago. And so, I think that will happen. I think that will probably have I'm not sure what sort of an effect it'll have, but I think Catholic trad media will definitely approve of that. And they'll see how trad friendly this Leo the 14th is. But again, to the last sort of comment here, there were 2 women lectors at the Novus Ordo Papal Mass today in the Sistine Chapel. It was at the table, right? They had a table right in the middle of the Sistine Chapel, not the high altar, the one against the wall there, which Leo the 14th had his back turned to, right? That's the famous last judgment there on the wall. And, I think that's sort of a sign of as to maybe where things could go. And I do suspect that the sort of trad conservative media will continue to do what they've been doing with Bergoglio. You're going to see a lot of quotes from Leo about abortion, about gender ideology. Interestingly enough, quite a few of them actually in the last 24 hours have turned out to be fake. So don't buy everything you're seeing about what this man said in years past. We don't know if a lot of them could be verified actually about gender ideology and abortion and things like that. And even if he did say some of these things, just like Bergoglio, he said some of those things too. And yet he invited transgendered persons to the Vatican and allowed and even encouraged Bishop Stowe out in Kentucky to invite in a transgender hermit to his diocese. So, don't watch what they say so much, watch what they do. And the Pillar just reported that when he was picking bishops, Prevost, quote, saw his task as that of identifying men who embodied Francis's ideals for bishops. And even more telling was in 2022, when he himself defended Francis's alteration, really adulteration, of the church's teaching on the death penalty. He said literally, quote, the church teaches that the death penalty is inadmissible. That was what Prevost said himself in 2022. So he believes all of these things. And so, it's a matter of what is he putting into action, what's he going to say and do, and to respond to that, we need to be very vigilant as those in the media, as well as just commentators who care very much about the church, who obviously want this crisis to come to an end. And I share the sympathies of those who are just really suffering from Stockholm Syndrome these last 13 years, and really 60 years, to see any sort of glimmer of change in the attitude of the occupied Vatican. But we need to make fully aware the public that this is, again, it's not about liturgical preference. It's not about communion in the tongue while kneeling. It's not about any of these things. It's about the complete destruction, it's the complete annulling and canceling of Vatican II. That's the answer. And so, when we start to see those things happening, and of course we pray and hope that steps will be taken towards that, if it doesn't happen overnight. But until then, let's keep our eye on the prize, as they say, and continue to watch and pray. So that's about all I have for the show.
Awesome.
Today. Thank you,
Mr.
so much.
Stephen Cox. I appreciate you coming on. I know you're an author. Do you have any books or websites you want to pitch before you leave?
Yeah, sure. You can go to my Substack blog, Cox News. You can also go find my 2 books, Navigating the Crisis in the Church, Essays in Defense of Traditional Catholicism. That's just on Amazon. And then St. Alphonsus for the 21st Century, a handbook for holiness, also on Amazon. And then I'm working on a book right now called What Your Priest Isn't Telling You About Vatican II. Of course, this I'm not referring to you, Father, but the Novus Ordo clergy, what they aren't telling you. So hopefully that will be out by the end of the year. And follow me, obviously, on Twitter /X at Stephen Cox. So thank you so much for having me, everybody, and I look forward to coming back on.
Perfect. Till next time. Thanks a lot, Stephen.
Thanks, Stephen.
God bless you. Awesome. Well, Louie, we lost you for a minute, so we'll bring you back in. I know Mario wanted to talk a bit about the quotes from Prevost, I believe, when he was elected. I know Mario has a couple quotes pulled up, but Louie, I don't know if there's anything that you wanted to comment on that we've talked about in the last few minutes. If not, we'll head over to Mario.
Yeah, we can jump to Mario. My apologies. The internet service here in my area is going in and out
I've
today.
never had internet issues on this podcast, so I don't know what your problem is.
Yeah, I'm sure.
It's always something.
Kevin, you're not in Germany right now, correct?
It's true, and I'm still having issues. Maybe it's this website.
Oh my goodness. You know what? So what I was suggesting we do is go through maybe the first things Leo XIV said from the balcony of St. Peter's. Or we could, I don't know, do we want to play the 1 minute, 20-second reaction of James Martin to Leo XIV?
Sure, let me see.
Or is that too much for... I
just
know nobody wants to see
his face makes me kind of like dry heave a little bit, but yeah, let me
I gotta tell you something nice so that you before we do that, if I had moved the camera, you would have seen the Carmelite sisters pass by.
Yeah.
Beautiful thing.
Well, that is much better news than Jim Martin. Oh,
yeah.
Goodness.
So let's go to the other stuff.
All right, Hellboy. Is that Mario? That's what you call him, right?
Yes.
All right, let's see.
Hey everyone, it's Jim Martin, and just sort of stunned by the news of the election of Pope Leo XIV, former Cardinal Prevost. I got to know him a little bit at the Synod. He was at my table, and I know him to be a down-to-earth, kind, modest, reserved guy, hardworking, decisive, not afraid of speaking his mind. It's a great choice. He brings a wealth of experience from being a missionary in Peru, a bishop in Peru. He speaks, of course, perfect Spanish. And Italian and English, of course, with a Chicago accent. He was the prior general of the Augustinians. I'm standing on top of the Augustinian rooftop right now. And he was also in charge of formation. I also think it's really important to note the choice of the name, Leo XIV, a nod to Leo XIII, who's the father of Catholic social teaching. So just an amazing choice. Surprising, but when you look back on it, makes perfect sense. He was the head of the dicastery of bishops, and so a lot of the cardinals would have known him from there. So I rejoice in this selection of Pope Leo XIV. I ask you all to pray for him. He's going to need our prayers. And God bless Leo the 14th. God bless the Augustinians. And from the rooftop of the Augustinians here in Rome.
Well, if there was any reason not to like this new selection, that is certainly one of them. Thanks very much, Mario, for making us sit through that.
Absolutely.
I also saw
I was
Pete
touched.
Buttigieg. Yeah, of course. Pete Buttigieg and Nancy Pelosi are also big fans. So we're really getting a murderer's row of fans of this new election, which I'm sure everyone would agree with. So Mario, I mean, maybe comments on that, because there are a couple of things that stuck out to me that the Louis the 13th social teachings, that was a pretty interesting one that
Leo the 13th. Oh goodness.
Yeah.
I'm
Leo,
pretty sure he won't have too much in common with Pope Leo the 13th. I would like to say, hey, if you're a fan of Pope Leo the 13th, why don't you repromulgate his encyclical Satis Cognitum on the unity of the Church, and we'll see how Vatican II does in light of Satis Cognitum, for example, right? Or I mean, Leo the 13th condemned Freemasonry in a number of documents, and of course, the Vatican still does, officially they're against Freemasonry. But they might as well be, because they're doing the work of the Freemasons themselves now. Maybe they just don't want competition. But this is one of those examples of where they appear like it's inconsistent, right? On the one hand, they'll say no Freemasonry, and on the other hand, try finding the difference between what Francis says and what the Freemasons say. Yes, you're going to find nuances. You're going to find nuanced differences. But there's a reason why the Freemasons were so appreciative of Francis, and it's because there isn't that much of a difference between his teaching and theirs. And whatever
I found it. Sorry, just real quick. I found it interesting that I think they quoted. Didn't they say like one of us? And it sticks with me because Bergoglio said that about Luther, and then the Mason said it about Bergoglio. It's just all one big happy family of apostates, and it's just
yes.
It's just
well, they're all united in not wanting actual Catholicism. Right. And so, that's so I'm not, look, the fact that he chose the name Leo. Well, so what? I mean, let's see what he will do with that. You can name yourself Leo and still be a modernist. These are just externals that maybe are meant to impress certain groups or whatever, but just choosing the name, it doesn't do anything.
Exactly. So you see the name, and then you see Jim Martin approving of it. It's like, okay, how is no one on the right, the conservative Novus Ordo media talking about that? At least I haven't seen it. No one's worried about it. No one's worried that these extremely pro-homosexual perverts are a fan of this new. Come on, I mean, it's not a good thing. This is a problem. Father, I don't know if you noticed anything in that video that you want to comment on.
Well, just on what you're saying right now, and that was for me the value of looking at those connections with the whole abuse scandals and how they reacted to that, because we're talking about a mafia, and this happens. Actually, it's interesting because it happens also in workplaces. Some people might know about this, but they will form a mafia and they'll support each other. They work very much like a cult, and so when you see, that Francis is connected to Maradiaga is connected to this guy, and they're all doing the same thing of cover-ups, and you see all these people supporting him. What that tells you is that he's in the club. He's in the club and he's part of the gang. You mentioned something that I also thought was very important when you look at the scandals and how they react, because Francis appoints him to be the head of the dicastery of bishops when he has already like 4 news stories, online about him. And so even if it wasn't true, the fact is a person with that baggage is definitely not the ideal to be in charge of appointing bishops, unless you are actually seeking to promote him, unless you're actually seeking to raise him up and for him to also help you with your agenda. So for me, the fact that he was connected with all these things, and in spite of that, Francis appoints him in that place and puts him in all these places that really lead him to be, do you see in English, papable?
Mm-hmm.
Papabile.
Yeah, papabile. Then that means that that was a plan, and that he wasn't an underdog. He was actually part of the club, whether if it was him or another, but definitely part of the club. And so that's when you see Martin and everybody else approving. That doesn't happen unless you're part of the club. You can see it with Trump. whatever you think of Trump, there's people that don't agree with him or whatever. But to me, at least, something that makes me wonder is that he definitely is not approved. Everybody fights him, so it's like, okay, maybe there's something there, whatever it might be. At least he's not in the plan. I don't know. But definitely they will not approve you. And that's, sorry, just one last point. Forget about the Trump thing right now, but every single Catholic pope, no exception, every single Catholic pope was eaten alive by the world. Every single one of them, news media, politicians, everyone was always eating him alive because they knew that he was the enemy. And from the moment that you see the Pope in Times Magazine, as the man of the year or something, is like, there's nothing to expect from this.
Great point. Louie, any comments on that video?
Oh, yeah. Well, it does tell you everything you need to know. I mean, it's not surprising in the least, though. This is the guy that suggested McElroy, who, again, he's the poster boy for gay Catholicism in the United States. This doesn't happen by accident. And one of the things Father talked about, maybe Francis was grooming Prevost to be the successor to him, whether he was or not, or whether he was unsuccessful at it. The simple fact of the matter is he wasn't going to put a person in that position who wasn't fully on board with his agenda, because the lifeblood of that agenda is the bishops. Because there are certain bishops. I'm in Baltimore. We have Archbishop Louie, not a friend of tradition at all, but he's totally ignored Traditionis Custodis and allows the Latin Mass and actually shows up at the Latin Mass and taught himself some Latin. He's not on our team, but he's also not, a supporter of the Bergoglian movement to extinguish the Mass. The bishops are an important part of the revolution. Bergoglio knew this. He brought Prevost in knowing that he was fully on board with this thing. Another thing that Father mentioned that's noteworthy before my connection went bad is the idea that Prevost may throw some bones to the traditional community in a very surface, just the visual way. Tolerate some Latin Mass, dress investments that don't appall people. He'll probably take up residence in the papal palace, things of this nature. What is that going to do, though? It's going to accelerate the Bergoglian agenda. It's not going to slow it down. It's not going to temper it. This guy's not a middle of the road person just because he throws out some traditional visuals. No, that's fuel for the agenda. I mean, look at what happens with the Resist the Pope movement. They applaud the things that they feel deserve to be applauded. They condemn the things that they think are wrong, but that agenda continues on full steam ahead. They're just going to be a little bit more distracted because they're going to be spending more time applauding. It's not going to slow things down in the least. It's actually going to speed them up, I think.
Agreed. And I got to comment on this. Bishop Pivarunis is from the same basic area of Chicago. So, Barb, I'm sorry, you're wrong. And the pizza is excellent. So, His Excellency Bishop Pivarunis and the pizza. So, there are good things that come out of Chicago. Now, the baseball teams and the
pizza's a little thick.
Okay, yeah, you have to have the taste for it. Yeah.
I was actually going to make that. Style? I was going to make that joke last night in the video, and I remembered Bishop is from Chicago. Be quiet.
Yeah, be careful what you say. Awesome. Hey, so, Marta, let's get into those quotes then, unless you have any further comments.
I just want to say, I just saw Taylor Marshall is doing a live stream with the title, I Submit to Pope Leo the 14th.
Oh, so Catholic.
I'm thinking, really? I bet
Except for the things he doesn't submit, right? Exactly. I've seen so many of these recognize and resist guys. Like, he is my Pope, and it's going to be 5 minutes until it's like, no, we don't have. Yeah, it's
sure. Well, until he does something that he really can't agree with, and then Leo the 14th is going to have to submit to him, basically. But anyway, so the first Urbi et Orbi, the first words out of the mouth of Leo, the first public words, right, addressed to the crowd and gathered in St. Peter's, the St. Peter's Square. So I'm reading here from the official Vatican website, the official English translation. Peace be with you all. Those were his first words. So that's definitely a step up from what Bergoglio said. If I'm not mistaken, he said, brothers and sisters, good evening. Okay. And that was I think normally traditionally the greeting was always Laudetur Jesus Christus, right? Praised be Jesus Christ. Well, peace be with you. I mean, that's what our Lord said after the resurrection, right, to the apostles in the upper room. So that's at least, that's good. Bergoglio's good evening. I don't know. Makes me think of Alfred Hitchcock. If any of you know that, that series, Alfred Hitchcock Presents, he would always start with good evening. But in any case, so Leo the 14th starts, so he talks about, dear brothers and sisters, and then he explains why he said, peace be with you all. He says, these are the first words spoken by the risen Christ, the good shepherd who laid down his life for God's flock. I would like this greeting of peace to resound in your hearts and your families, among all people, wherever they may be, in every nation and throughout the world. Peace be with you. So, there's nothing objectionable there, right? That's a beautiful thing to say. And then it already gets problematic. He says, it is the peace of the risen Christ, a peace that is unarmed and disarming, humble and persevering, a peace that comes from God, the God who loves us all unconditionally. Okay. There is a sense, as far as I know, there is a sense in which you can say God loves us unconditionally, which is that God, even though we were his enemies, and it was our God who took the initiative and offered us reconciliation in Jesus Christ. So that's not due to any merit of ours. Obviously, in that sense, it was unconditional. It's even though we all sinned and we all turned away from God, he nevertheless unconditionally loved us to the point of offering himself as a redemptive sacrifice. But it is not true in the sense that most people will understand it, which is, well, no matter what you do, God will always be your friend, so to speak. Well, I mean, have these people ever read scripture? Especially the Old Testament, but even in the New Testament. And maybe, Father Zepeda, maybe you could, I don't know, could you flesh that out a bit, or am I wrong in anything I've said here?
No, I totally, like, when I was listening to it yesterday, trying to grab it from the Italian, and that immediately, raised the flag, because here's an interesting story that kind of points out that this is not an idle thing. I had some people that I was working with, and they used to give spiritual retreats in the Novus Ordo. And so when they first converted, they came to me and they wanted to continue giving those retreats. And I was like, well, I don't think so. I mean, I would need to review everything that you're giving, basically. And they said, Father, these retreats are fine. Everything is good with them. And I said, okay, well, show me the book. And I see the first page in the scheme of, the daily meditations. It says, God doesn't ask you to love him. He just loves you. And I was like, he doesn't ask you, he commands you to love him. That's like the first commandment. So, that's actually the idea that they get. Is the problem with this idea that loves God is unconditional, as they use it at least, is that it goes back to subjectivity in morality. You don't need to worry about sin. You don't need to worry whether you're being bad or wrong. Do whatever you want, be LGBT, be divorced, be whatever. God's going to love you. And so it's not just a point of theology. It's a point that actually destroys the whole basis of morality. That for God's love to be efficient, well, I don't know how to say it without making some mistake here or there, but for me to be able to receive God's love, and I would really say it, for God to love you, you need to at least be well-disposed. You need to at least be able to receive his grace and willing to receive his grace, I guess you could say. This is a whole thing that theologically we could get into a lot of little details, but definitely one could not say that God loves you unconditionally in every sense, as you said it.
Right. And he doesn't clarify, just like Bergoglio didn't either. He said the same thing. And our world, especially the Western world, understands that to mean no matter what you do, God is fine with it. He's okay with it. And in the end, you go to heaven. That's how they understand that. And that's false. I mean, it's true, obviously, that, if you are in mortal sin, God still loves you in the sense that he wants you to repent, and he's willing to offer his forgiveness, but he hasn't promised you to, he hasn't promised that you will repent. Like he will offer his grace up to at least up to a certain point, is my understanding. and then but it depends on you. Like you can actually reject that grace and not repent, and then at your particular judgment, you will be condemned to hell for all eternity. So, in any case, maybe do you want me to continue with the text here? With he said it was interesting. Leo the 14th here. He had it looked like it was a prepared speech that he was reading off a notepad. And that's a new one, because usually they would just speak off the cuff, and he had quite a few things to say. And then, so after what I just quoted about God loves us unconditionally, he said he praised Francis. We can still hear the faint yet ever courageous voice of Pope Francis as he blessed Rome, the Pope who blessed Rome, who gave his blessing to the world, the whole world, on the morning of Easter. Allow me to extend that same blessing. God loves us, God loves you all, and evil will not prevail. All of us are in God's hands. So let us move forward. That's definitely something Bergoglio would agree with. Without fear, together, hand in hand with God and with one another. We are followers of Christ. Christ goes before us. The world needs his light. Humanity needs him as the bridge that can lead us to God and his love. Help us, one and all, to build bridges through dialogue and encounter, joining together as one people, always at peace. Thank you, Pope Francis. Let's see if there was anything. I don't want to quote the whole thing here. He did say a few things in Spanish. Interestingly enough, he did not say anything in English, which is his native language. And so at the end, then he says, to all of you brothers and sisters in Rome, in Italy, throughout the world, we want to be a synodal church, a church that moves forward, a church that always seeks peace, that always seeks charity, that always seeks to be close above all to those who are suffering. Today is the day of the prayer of supplication to Our Lady of Pompeii. Our Mother Mary always wants to walk at our side, to remain close to us, to help us with her intercession and her love. So I would like to pray together with you. Let us pray together for this new mission, for the whole church, for peace in the world, and let us ask Mary, our Mother, for this special grace. And then he intoned the Hail Mary and prayed the Hail Mary. So, and then he gave his blessing. So yeah, it looks like Bergoglio 2.0, but in the style more of Benedict XVI.
One should not make light of the fact that he mentions Francis, because that is an acknowledgement of political allegiance. You know, when you're in that position, you don't say things idly or just because they sound good. You know, you're sending a message that, yes, I'm the successor of Francis, and his line is good, I approve it. Which, if this was a pope, quote unquote, that was against the policies of Francis, what did Trump do? You know, the first
I was just going to say that. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. The first thing you do is disavow the last guy and say, like, totally wrong. You don't say that as a pope, perhaps, but you would at least say, I'm not going to mention that. It's like, we're totally disconnected. And so that's important.
Yeah. And I think I kind of lost my train of thought here. I was...
No, well, we'll head to Louie. Louie, do you have any comments on these words?
Kevin, I'm not sure you guys can hear me.
We hear you.
I think you can. Good. Yeah, so the thing that really jumped out of the speech was when he mentioned this idea that we want to be a synodal church. I mean, speak for yourself, sir. I don't want to be a synodal church. But this is why James Martin's so excited. You know, as he told it in his video, they sat at the same table during these synods on synodality. You know, he knows the man. He knows for a fact that he's invested in the synodal process. The synodal process is so important to him that he first addressed to the people of the world. That tells me that it's a priority agenda item for him.
Yes.
So look for this synod on synodality to take off from here, even if it.
Oh,
we
no.
lost Louie.
Oh, man.
Mario,
Yeah.
I had a question about. I think at least that's not just my internet connection at this time. Maybe it's also Louie's. Mario, maybe you can describe really briefly what does that mean? The synodality. Like I hear it all the time too, and I don't quite understand what that means. I understand
Synodality.
Bergoglianism, but I don't get it.
Synodality. Nobody really knows what it is. That's part of what I think makes it so attractive to them, to the modernists. It reminded me of, so the whole, Bergoglio started throwing this out there. I think synodality, good. Louie is back. Maybe he can elaborate on that. The idea behind synodality is, I don't know what it is like officially, at least not off the top of my head, but I would say what they're trying to do is, with this concept, they're trying to justify changing Catholic teachings and practices on the grounds that the people of God that have been walking together and discerning what the Spirit is saying to the church, they want to, like the people of God are behind this change. It's not a change that's coming from the top down. This is something that the people of God and that they're discerning and walking, and whatever terminology they use, encountering one another. That is, they're discerning the Spirit, and that's how they're going to justify changing revelation. However they're going to word it. Of course, they're not going to say, oh, by the way, the Holy Spirit was wrong all this time. Now he's telling us this. They're not going to put it like that. But that, I think, is what's hidden behind all this gobbledygook, and that's the intention. And to me, it definitely has some Marxist overtones. This whole idea of these what are they called? Well, in Russian they would call these the Soviets, right? These what are they called? Councils in English, I guess. Little people's councils. I don't know, Father. You're nodding. Are you? Do you know what I'm trying to say?
That's what it means. I think.
Yeah.
That Soviet was the council of people.
Yes, the people, and of course it was all rigged or whatever. But that's a big concept in Marxism.
And something that is very dangerous about that too, and I think that's part of the intent, is that you create a bureaucracy. And so it's this blob that now no one can attack, because if you have a man that is the Pope, you could go to the Pope and say, why did you allow this? Why are you doing this? Why are you not doing this? But if it's the synod of synodality, it's like trying to go to the IRS and complain about why did they charge you more this year. You're just attacking a whole bunch of nothings. No offense to the IRS people. But
offense to the IRS people.
But that's what it is. You're creating a bureaucracy in the church that then no one can address or attack or complain to.
Interesting. Yeah. So it is kind of just, so it's using that excuse, but do they even need it? That's what I don't really understand, because I mean, it seems like people in the Novus Ordo just take it all down. They just eat their dinner, they eat whatever's given to them. And that's why I always ask, I mean, I think I asked Louie this maybe last time, and it's like, what's it going to take for, groups of thousands or hundreds even to start saying, hey, we can't do this anymore. We're going to go find Father Zepeda in Denver, and that's what I don't quite understand why they're even pushing it so far. Maybe they're trying to get the I don't know, the SSPX, or people who are a little even more conservative. But I mean, Louie, maybe I'll ask you that again. I mean, is there anything, we talked about this last show, I know we're going to do it again, is there anything that they can do in Rome that's going to make people say, no, we can't do this anymore? And I've said this for the last couple of weeks. My opinion is that if they have another Francis 2.0, then people are going to say, I can't do this for 20 more years. I can't do it for 20 more years. And that's my hope, that once he does women priests or whatever it is he's going to do, following in Francis's footsteps, I hope that's when people say, I just can't do it for much longer. But what do you think?
Well, there certainly is a process at which things get so ridiculous and so not Catholic that it opens eyes. Bergoglio did that for me. 2013, when Benedict resigned, I was a little bit excited because I thought there might be some value to the story that, well, he resigned because he got that dossier, if you recall, that revealed so much scandal in the Vatican, but he's a little too old, a little too weak to carry on with the cleaning up of the mess. So he's going to resign to bring in a younger man who will carry the staff forward. And then we got Bergoglio. So there is a point at which, when the wheels come off the cart, some eyes can open. And that happened for me under Francis, because he was just so outrageous. Clearly the man's not Catholic. But this is a spiritual thing. And I remember the lead up to Amoris Laetitia, the 2 synods on the family. And so many people were out there, spokespersons for the Resist the Pope movement, priests even, talking about, well, if he allows communion for the divorced and remarried, then we'll know we got a real problem on our hands. I can recall Bishop Fillet saying in 2014, what we have here is a genuine modernist. Well, if these things don't make you turn the other way and say, wait a minute, this thing's not Catholic. That guy's not Catholic. He's not a pope. What's it going to take? The ordination of women? I doubt it. The Taylor Marshalls, the Peter Kwasniewskis of the world, they'll just find a reason to reject that, but to stay the course.
Sure. They just won't go to masses offered by women.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, and so just so that you know how bad that is, in the SSPX, we had no offense to them here, but here in Denver, we had a situation where there were priests from the Novus Ordo, not reordained, and they were having mass. And some of the things that were told to me that people were saying was, well, we're going to go to the mass that is not offered by the Novus Ordo priest. So I return, well, the hosts are in the tabernacle or consecrated by the Novus Ordo priest is still the same. Well, no, because the priest said that when he says mass, he's going to consecrate the ones in the tabernacle. That's not how it works. It's like you're saying, this is my body. You're not saying that is my body. You can't do that. You consecrate what's on the corporal. But anyways, I just want to point something here that is to me very important. One of the main dangers that the Novus Ordo has done in people is precisely to get them to the point where they don't care. To me, that's even the greatest danger, the greatest evil that has been done. When they actually get people to the point where they say, I don't care anymore. I don't care about theology. I don't care about the validity of the sacraments. I don't care. God is good. It's going to work. Because once they're there, nothing can move them. I can get a very convinced Lutheran and argue with him very heatedly and maybe bring him to the faith because he cares. But once you have a person that doesn't care, nothing can move them. You can have anything, Pachamamas in the Vatican. You basically have clipped their legs. It's like they're just not going to move.
Well, they say the opposite of love is not hate; it's apathy, right? Mm-hmm. In this case, that certainly makes sense because you're feeling absolutely nothing. I had a short chat with Timothy Gordon on Twitter. He's another way, somewhat conservative Novus Ordo, like semi-conservative, and he said the same thing. He's like, if Leo the 14th doesn't change the, I think it was Amoris Laetitia, if he doesn't go, fix that issue with the divorcees, then there's going to be big trouble. And I asked him, like, what does that mean? What do you mean? Big, what's your point? Like, does it mean he's not Pope anymore? Or does it mean that you don't like him? You like him less? And he couldn't answer. Like, anyone could go find it. It was just this morning. He doesn't, it's just like, oh, I don't like it. If he doesn't do this, then, oh, naughty Leo. Oh, shoot, you bad guy. There's no answer. It's like, what are we doing here? You're going to criticize the Pope and say, Timothy Gordon, say the Pope has to do this or else. But then even with the or else, it's like,
what is the else?
Oh, yeah, I'm going to slap his hand. What are you going to do? What are you talking about? What is your point? What is the next step? And they have no answer. It's the same with Taylor Marshall, a bunch of these guys. Like, if he does this, then shoot, tisk, and then nothing. Absolutely nothing. It's pathetic. I'm sorry.
I think a number of these YouTube influencer videos, whatever, about theology are more like entertainment than anything else. In recent days, during the Novus Ordo Sede Vacante period, you saw videos popping up like, the next Pope must do these 5 things. What kind of a title is that? What do you mean he must do these things? And what if he doesn't? I mean, for what to be the case? For what to happen? Where is the, it just didn't make any sense to me.
Right. Well, people become Taylor Marshallists, right? They're no longer Catholics. They're just following the truth coming through him as a filter. It's insane. I mean, it's like, why? I mean, it's the same. If people are listening to me or any of us here, not talking about the actual teaching of the Catholic Church, and they're actually they're basing their faith on what we say here, then it's the same thing. It's like, you got to base it on what the Catholic Church actually teaches, for goodness sake.
You know what?
I think that's obvious, but
if he wants to be consistent, he should actually shut down his channel now. He just said he submits to Leo the 14th. Well, perfect. So you can just cancel the whole channel and people can go straight to Leo the 14th from now on. No more
Especially since he
filtering.
talks, he's American. Yeah, he doesn't even need someone to translate for him anymore. Yeah.
Yes. Besides, what's the alternative? Leo the 14th, whatever, issues a decree, and then you're going to tune into Taylor Marshall to see what to think about it. I mean, it doesn't make these things don't make sense. The whole recognize and resist thing, it's a gigantic illusion, and hopefully people will recognize that now that they're looking at probably the next 20 years of more of the same. Like, you guys, what are you doing? Like, for example, I'm thinking of somebody like Peter Kwasniewski. You're trying to hold to a religion that the whole hierarchy that you adhere, that you acknowledge as the Catholic hierarchy, doesn't believe in. And then what? Like, so Francis issues Traditionis Custodes, and you, Peter Kwasniewski, say, no, that doesn't count. No, it's invalid. No, it's, people get on our case about saying, well, you say they're not popes. Everybody else recognizes them as popes. Well, but that's because there is no other possibility. We're not saying that as though we had authority and sort of like, I render a judgment on this fellow. It's like, no, it is the necessary conclusion. If you believe what the Catholic Church teaches about the papacy, then these men can't possibly hold it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So,
and practically, there's no other way to act. That's the thing. I was just arguing with someone about this. Sorry, I'm just playing here with my camera, but someone told me like, hey, the letters are wrong.
No, before was better. You had it mirrored. Yeah, either way.
But I like this side better. That way I can actually look to Louie.
Got it.
But the thing is, even practically speaking, you can't really have the other option, because if he's the Pope, you have to submit. So, I was arguing with someone that was kind of on the fence with this. They were like, I'm not sure if he's the Pope or he's not the Pope, but they come to my mass. Mm-hmm. That doesn't make sense, I told them. I mean, if you don't know, then you should not come and receive sacraments from me, because I am definitely, in your view, even possibly a schismatic. So even practically speaking, if you really are Taylor Marshall and you say he is the Pope, then the only option you have is to obey. And what I always tell people, for example, and again, I tend to say it with all due respect a lot, with all due respect to Taylor Marshall, but it's like, show me the book. That's the thing, is like, I'm not telling you anything that the Catholic Church doesn't teach. You show me the book where it says that you as a Catholic, you can reject a council, that you as a Catholic, you can reject any command of the Church, or that you even have the option to judge over it. Show me one single book, and I'll say it right now. Show me one single book that says that specifically, and I'll shut down my channel. Because then it's like, all right, then we're wrong. We're wrong. There is not one book in 2,000 years of history that says that you as a Catholic can question the council approved by a Pope, or that you as a Catholic can question the orders and the bulls and whatever commands that the Pope gives. Not one book that says that. But there are books, several, that say that if a Pope loses the faith, or if a person claiming the papacy loses the faith, they're no longer popes. We are teaching what the Catholic Church teaches. They are making up totally everything from not everything, but they're making up the whole position from nothing, from straw.
No, it's a great point, Father. And there goes Louie again.
Louie, come on.
Louie, what are you doing, man?
It's always after I talk. It's always after I say something.
It's like, man, I just don't want to hear it anymore. Well, I want to there's an interesting point here from Crusader Filmworks. I'm going to get that in a second. But Father, I'd love it if you, because I think, as we all know, and I'll get to Crusader Filmworks and then I'll make my point. Because he says at this point, we as true Catholics need to work to convert the Protestants. The Novus Ordo is pretty much hopeless on a large scale from my point of view. I think it's an interesting point. Hopeless is a little harsh, but I get the point. And Father, I think we'd all agree that we mostly need more prayer, more grace, more good people, more sisters, more priests, more vocations, etc. And you have the new Carmelite convent starting up in Colorado. And I would love it for anyone watching if they could maybe donate that. What's the best way to help out with the Carmelite convent that it's very fresh. I know that started within the last few months. How can people help out with that?
I guess contact me through the Catholic Wire or through Kevin Davis, because my webpage is kind of failing. But there's a webpage that we have for donations. We can put it there later on.
Too many people donating, huh?
Yeah.
Right. I'm sure that's the problem, right? Yeah, everyone you can if you want to donate to the Father and to the Carmelite sisters, which again, if we want to actually win culturally, or of course save our souls, these nuns who all they do is work and pray. That's the way. That's the way. And if any miracle is going to happen, that's how we have to do it. So email me, kevin89davis@gmail.com, or go check out Father's. They can probably just send you something over on the catholicwire.com that you have a contact.
Sure.
Perfect.
And I would add to that, every other congregation and the seminary. I mean, it's all we need to work on that. I want to tell you something. It's an interesting story. Someone came and told me the other day, I can't remember where it was. They said, if you really believe he's not the Pope, why don't you go and preach it in Italy? And I was like, oh, that's a good point. Well, we do have priests in Italy, so it's their job. But then right before the conclave, when the conclave started, we were doing the ladies' retreat in Colorado. And I was thinking to myself, I should go to Italy. Right now is the perfect time to go in there and start preaching in the Plaza of St. Peter. This is all a scam. These guys are all wrong. With my Catholic Wire shirt, of course.
Of course.
That would be interesting. I must say, I haven't given up the idea. That would be I probably would be put in jail and you'd never hear of me again. But it would be an interesting.
Well, my impression, though, Father, was that at least the people in Rome were not fans of Bergoglio. They were not. That this was not a beloved Pope. So I actually imagine if you went there and stood up on on the street corner, I would bet you would get a pretty good reaction.
What that made me think.
Not now, though.
Yeah.
Not now, yeah. Well, it would be an
Leo.
interesting. It would get a lot of views, but no. But what it made me think of, and this is an interesting part, is that a big part of our mission is obviously to convert people and Protestants and everything, but we should really strive. Our main goal should be, when it comes to Catholics, is to convince as many people as possible that these guys are a scam. It's logical. It's like, yeah, Father, that's what we've been doing for the last 20 years. But yeah, that's actually, I think that the goal, I don't want to say restoration, the goal to the splendor of the Catholic Church, if it's in God's will that it happens before the coming of the Antichrist, is actually that the most people possible know that these guys are scammers and that the Vatican II Church is not the real Catholic Church. And that's basically like what we should try to do with most of the Novus Ordo people, even before they come to our church. Maybe that's the first thing that we need to get into. But it's an interesting thought. I mean, when the guy told me, at least I wanted.
So then everyone, we're gonna do a weekly podcast with everyone here, and we're gonna. I'm kidding. I know everyone's kind of panicking a little bit, but no, we do need to do more of these things, more of these podcasts, spreading the truth as best as we can. And again, guys, I know I've said it 5 times now, but go check out the Catholic Wire, Father Zepeda, novusordowatch.org with Mario and akacatholic.com. Mario also has the podcast. What's that called again, Mario?
Tratcast. Hang on. I can't do it now. Sorry. Tratcast.
and Louie is also kicking up his YouTube channel again. And then again, I think you can find Louie on YouTube at Louie Verrecchio. Is that right?
Correct.
Awesome.
Yes.
And you can support us too. Anyone who wants to support us, Catholic Landing Podcast, check us out at Patreon. You can give us. Really, it is a big difference, and I'm sure for these other men as well. And Father, even if you give $2 a month, it actually really helps. It's pretty nice. We really appreciate it. It's not much for you, but it's a lot for us. If more people did that, it would actually make a big difference. We'd have a lot more time. I can tell you, I'm working 2 other jobs with 3 little kids, so it's this is partly why you get a garage podcast sometimes, because I don't have the ability to do something professional, but support everyone here, guys. I think we're probably pretty ready to wrap it up. I think we'll do a last round of everyone's opinions. I think an hour and a half is about good. If anyone in the comment section has a question for Father, Mario, or Louie, maybe send them now. We will get to a couple of them perhaps. But maybe Mario, or no, Father, maybe I'll start with you. Maybe if you have any final comments or just kind of overview, whatever you want to say before we wrap this up, that'd be great.
Sure. When this first started, the whole conclave and everything, I wasn't going to even say anything or make any video because, to my mind, it's like, I don't even care. This is another religion. It's it's like if I was worried about who's being picked up as the head of the Lutheran, Congress in Kentucky or whatever. But it is important because they claim the name of Catholic that they shouldn't have. However, I would say this as a conclusion is really the best thing you can do for the church, the best thing you can do for everyone in your parish, in your family, is to sanctify yourself. And yes, chip in, cooperate with all of us. But also, I think that really, when it comes down to it, it's a spiritual battle, and it's a battle of grace against sin. And so really the best thing we all can do is to try to sanctify ourselves as much as possible, sanctify our families as much as possible. I'll make what do you call it when you're making like publicity for your thing?
A little
pitch
plug.
or a plug.
pitch.
That's the word. Yeah.
I'll make a plug here for mental prayer. That, is something that a lot of people don't do. Many of them are afraid of it. And that's the real thing. That's what makes real big, strong Catholics, is among all other things. But mental prayer is very important. So I think that as things progress in this way, much more useful than seeing at what he says or doesn't say, which is necessary. Again, thank you for all of you that do it. But it's much more important that you yourself sanctify yourself. And that's the beginning. That's the beginning of a real change, you could say.
Perfect, Father. Before I get to Mario, I just saw this comment. How will the papacy be restored? I think we're not going to get into that. It's very complicated, but we're going to need a miracle. So lots of prayers and more sisters and more Carmelite sisters. So again, that's going to be whatever it's going to take, whatever the way is, we're going to need more of that to make it happen, and more unity. That's my opinion. Absolutely. Before anything happens, we have to be more unified as Catholics. Just my 2 cents.
And I think that the first thing needs to be, we must pray. We must pray that this madness will end. However it may end, and whatever may happen, but it enough already. It needs to end.
Amen. Yeah, Mario, if you want any last words, I mean, whatever you want to say about Prevost, the whole what's upcoming. Again, I suppose again for you, it's probably going to be a harder job for you. He's a little smoother than Bergoglio.
Well, it'll be. I said yesterday, I released a Tratcast last night, and a Tratcast Express 208. And I said in there, it's probably going to be more of the same, but it's going to be easier on the eyes and ears. And that's, in that sense, like I am well, got to be careful how I phrase that. I don't want it to be misunderstood, but it'll be, although you're still dealing probably with the same content as Bergoglio, at least it'll be a little less unpleasant to go to read it, at least based on a few things I've heard Leo XIV say. So it's going to be easier on the ears for sure. But of course, then, like I said, that makes it more dangerous. But I do welcome the change from Bergoglio. I mean, we've had Bergoglio for 12 years. I'm glad to be moving on from that, even though, of course, in many ways it was very entertaining and made my job very easy. All I needed to do was quote the guy, basically, right? But no, I'd like to say something about private prophecy chasers. You know who you are. For those who were thinking that that the St. Malachy so-called St. Malachy prophecies are authentic and they were expecting Peter the Roman, I'm sorry to inform them that they got Bob the American instead.
So Mario, are you saying the Diamond Brothers are not the witnesses of the end times?
I guess not. I guess not.
We're all surprised.
It was a close call, right? But
that's a great comment, Father Zepeda, to say the difference between is Kamala Harris to Gavin Newsom. That's a perfect analogy. I totally agree.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, Kamala's like, oh, please stop. But then Newsom. Yeah, he's also
the common adage is you can put lipstick on a pig, but at the end of the day, it's still a pig, right?
Yeah. Someone mentions that. Sorry, just real quick. Someone mentioned that Bishop Sanborn had an excellent commentary. I absolutely believe it.
I put it's on novusordowatch.org. First blog post as of right now is Bishop Sanborn's take on Leo XIV. He did a video yesterday with Stephen Heiner. The only thing I'd like to add, so since Father said, they're trying to get people to a point where they basically fall into despair, nothing matters anymore, and so on. I think that is indeed definitely a problem. We'll have to pray that people not fall into despair, but that they instead come and seek and see the truth about this. But I do think also that there is an opening there for grace once they get to the point where they realize that in their religion, in the Novus Ordo religion, at the new Mass and just the whole thing, if none of these things matter, then they might as well be sedevacantists, right? Then it just then that doesn't matter either, so to speak. So then once they realize that from within their own framework, it shouldn't matter if they're sedevacantists or not. That is where I pray and hope that they will realize, okay, well then I have nothing to lose here. Although I'm not trying to, make this into a Pascal's wager, but what I'm saying. Basically, even if we're wrong, we're right, is kind of what I'm getting at.
Well, and if they walk into the church in Denver and see some Carmelite sisters, they're going to realize, well, someone's got the truth here. So,
Yes.
Again, the support fathers.
These things still matter, but you won't find them in the Vatican II church.
100%. Louis, last words?
In all things, God brings about good for those who love him. So we don't know what direction this is going to go. Sure, there's going to be more lipstick on this pig. And that will appeal to people who are mostly motivated by emotional feelings. He strikes a nice figure. He looks good. He sounds good. Like Gavin Newsom compared to Kamala Harris. It's a great line, Father. But one of the last things I want to point out, I'm already seeing on social media people talking about, we've already had peaceful universal acceptance of the man. He's absolutely the Roman pontiff. It's an infallible fact. Okay. So just anybody out there that's flirting with this theory, what you need to know is that the whole idea about peaceful universal acceptance, what that does, it heals at the root any issues in the election process itself, procedural problems, mistakes that may have been made. It doesn't turn a non-Catholic into a Catholic. And on that point, I just want to read a brief quote that I think is very helpful on that particular topic. It's from Monsignor Van Noort. And if I can get it up here on my screen, he says, when someone has been constantly acting as Pope and has theoretically and practically been recognized as such by the bishops and by the Universal Church, it is clear that the ordinary and universal magisterium is giving an utterly clear-cut witness to the legitimacy of his succession, end quote. And this is from Van Noort's work called Sources of Revelation. The operative phrase here is constantly acting as Pope. So the man that constantly acts as Pope is constantly teaching, explaining, defending the true faith. He most certainly is not out there preaching doctrines that oppose the true faith. That's the opposite of constantly acting as Pope. So don't be fooled by the fact that the majority of your neighbors and friends and people in your parish and what have you think that this man is Pope. That's not peaceful universal acceptance. So be on guard for that. We're going to see more of that claim moving forward. And I thank all three of you for the work that you're doing. And it's been a pleasure to sit with you.
You as well, though. And I think that's a great point. And it's hopefully something that we can get more panels like this, maybe one-on-ones as well, to talk about that, exactly that type of thing. These arguments that are now going to start coming up again, maybe different arguments. Hopefully we can come back here on Catholic Family Podcast with whatever groups we can get together, because I love it. It's really, I learned so much. I just sit here kind of like, duh, but it's great. I mean, it's really fantastic. You learn so much. Everyone in the comment section, thank you all so very much. Father, Mario, Louie, Stephen, who was on earlier. We really greatly appreciate what you do. And again, we hope to see you all soon when there's some other big topic to cover and to take apart and dissect. Father, last words?
Last words just for the next podcast. Maybe it's better to say that God's love is undeserved rather than unconditional, because there are conditions, but it's not deserved, which is not the same.
I like it.
That'll be the next podcast at some point.
Yes, let's do it, Father. Awesome. Everyone, please like, share, subscribe, comment, all that stuff. Again, go check out the websites from these gentlemen and from Father. And until next time, God bless you all. And don't ever forget to pray for a true Pope.
God bless you.